Milan here. Really fortunate today to have Andy Dutton with us. So Andy is a senior leader in a Fortune 500 company on the development side. And when I was talking with Andy, I found out that he spent most of his career growing it in a remote first world. So I think he would give us a lot of value in just giving us his experiences, telling us a little bit about his career, and then what would he go back and tell his younger self. And I'm going to ask him to talk about two different things. One is focused on the remote work aspect, like he's done it. So what mistakes or pitfalls would he avoid if he were to do it again? And just maybe some of his thoughts and insights about what it means, pros and cons, pitfalls or not. Because right now in the post-COVID world, I think the remote first environment is going to be much more prevalent for everyone, especially in the tech sector. And then also in general, just general career guidance, what would he go back and tell his younger self? So Andy, thanks for joining us today. You'll see, you can look down in the description to find his LinkedIn profile. So Andy, welcome. Please tell us a little about your career.
All right, Milan, thank you. Happy to be here. So I started my career in consulting. I worked for a very large system integrator. And I did that for 12 years. And during most of that time, I traveled extensively. So I was quite comfortable getting on an airplane every week or almost every week and being at a client site remotely. And in fact, I almost never went into the office per se, or at least my company's office. And in 2002, I left that company and I went to BEA Systems. And BEA Systems is based in San Jose. I live in Seattle. And so I flew down to San Jose a lot, 2 to 3 times a month, because I felt it was really important to be with the rest of the team. I worked on the CIO's staff. And so it was important to me to interact with my colleagues in meetings and what have you. And then, of course, BEA was acquired by Oracle, where I've been ever since. And it's just, for whatever reason, I love Seattle. I've felt no desire whatsoever to move. And even though I've been asked, hey, would you come to the Bay Area? And that probably would have been beneficial in some ways. It's just not something I ever entertained doing. So I've just worked really hard to be as effective as I can be working remotely. And in our case now, there's kind of an ebb and flow of travel. And so sometimes I'm traveling a lot, sometimes I'm not. And I try to make the most of my time when I do travel to interact with my colleagues, my managers and whomever, just to really get the most out of those trips and what have you.
That's great. So let me drill in on that one just real briefly. So in order to ensure that you when you can't travel, like now in the last couple of years, what are some of the tactics and things that you use as a senior leader to ensure that your career is still growing or your values still being recognized by your leadership team? Like, what are some of the tactical things that you do in a remote environment to ensure that continues effectively?
Okay. Actually, I want to take one step back and
Sure.
just there's a couple other tactical things I think about working remotely that some of this may feel like common sense, and yet I think it's really important to establish that yes, I am working remotely, but I am in the office from 8 until whenever, just like the people that are in the office, right? So my former boss was the CIO at BEA, and he said something like, Andy, I've just never met someone who's been as effective as you working remotely. And I attribute that to, one, I was always available. So it wasn't like I would look, I take a lunch break like everybody else. I work out like everybody else, but I still make it a real point to be available and in the office working normal, like office hours, so to speak. So that's what I think. This, just in terms of, Milan, your question about how do I stay effective? I think, one, when I do get the opportunity to be with my colleagues, whether it's at headquarters or in some other office, I've tried to make investments in personal relationships. So going to lunch, going to dinner, going out for drinks, what have you, just trying to learn more about people's personal lives and getting to know people on a personal level. I think that really helps you establish effective work relationships. So that's always been really important to me, to try to develop a real relationship with some of my peers. Okay, what else?
No, that's great. And I'll definitely just kind of comment for myself. And I really agree. It's a great point about being available as a remote employee. I remember as a personal example, I'm with you. Like I'm on Slack when I'm working. I take a lunch break and I might work out as well. But I do think it's important for people to really recognize that you are in the office. And I'll use an example of somebody I worked with before. I worked with somebody in my last company, and I did not know for 8 months he was not in the local area. Like that, he was in Oregon. And I'm a Seattleite as well, as you know. And so it was funny when he was actually in the office, he set up personal meetings because we were working on the phone and through email. And he says, well, I'm only up for a few days. I go, up? I didn't even realize. But that's because I think he had the same tactic as you. And I think I agree with as well. For me, is you are available like normal working hours. And I do make a concerted effort, I think, to let people know that, like, when they Slack me, I try not to let it go. At least acknowledge, hey, I'm here, I'm busy, I'll get back to you. Because I do think it's important for people to realize that the work environment's the same, like whether you're in an office or here. So that's a great point. I think a lot of people can think about how it's perceived if you don't respond back and you're working remote, right? It's like, are you available? Are you working? And so that's a really great point on that, just kind of being available in office hours. Then the other one I liked is what you're talking about, the relationship building side. And I talk a little bit about this in other videos as well, is I think as you do when you're at headquarters, well, when you can't travel, I think we do have to figure out other ways to have what I call those deeper connections. And like when you and I started talking a little bit more,
Yeah.
not just work stuff. I mean, you really, I talk about, it's hard to trust somebody that you don't know. And in a work environment, you really have to get to know individuals and people to know what's important to them, what their challenges are, in order for us to kind of work better. So again, I really appreciate, the fact you bring those up, because as a remote employee, for all of us now, I think we have to change the tool sets that we're using because we're not in the office. And with your experience, I think it's really great for people to hear that you still can make it to senior levels in mostly a remote environment. And we all have to consider that for all of our employees. We're both managers, so how do we enable our teams as well? So thank you for those insights. So let's just talk about in general from career, just general career advice on what you would tell your younger self. Are there other things that you would tell yourself if you could go back that you might do differently, or that worked for you that you would do again?
That's a great question. I think a couple things. One, I, I I I am very confident that I could have advanced, however you want to use that word. I could have advanced more quickly, or even had more opportunities, had I chosen to work at a headquarters of a company and been there 5 days a week. You cannot discount the value of being there in person, especially before Zoom and all these video conferencing tools we had. So I think if you're going to do this and say, I want to work where I want to live where I live, and that's the most important thing to me, I think just know that you're making a conscious decision to do that. Right. So I think that's number one. And I feel like I've done that. I've known, hey, maybe I'm not where I would have been had I done things differently, but I'm okay with that because I love living where I live, and that's what's important to me. That's the first thing. I think the second thing is, I've been watching this. There's a phenomenon, at least in our company, that the more senior the representation on a meeting,
Mm-hmm.
the more likely people are on video. And so I've
True.
really made it a point to, every meeting I'm in, I turn on my video.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe nobody else does. Maybe I'm the only one, but I'm going to keep doing it. And what I found is more and more people say, oh, I'll put myself on video. Look at that. Someone's on video. Okay. And so I think it's really valuable just to show I have a working environment. You can see me in person, actually engaged with you, and I don't know that you're off doing something else. So I think that's just a good practice for people to keep, in my opinion. And I was gonna add, like, obviously not everybody has a dedicated office.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm not suggesting that's a requirement, but I think whatever your corner of the home is where you do your work, I think you make that as the best office you can, and you use that, and you show your face. I think there's a lot of value in just being online. So, anyways,
No, no, that's great. And I definitely agree with you because I do find that the most senior person usually will, if they do turn on their camera, then more people are apt to. Not everybody will, to the reasons that you say, but I do think it is important for people to kind of see kind of you because you would in a personal meeting, so why wouldn't you on camera, right? And I do think that you're absolutely right. And I think I would add one other thing that I try to do when I'm in like a meeting. I try to keep my focus. I really don't like it when people are looking to the side, they're looking at their email when you're in a meeting, because
yeah,
again, it's kind of disrespectful to me. So I really try to keep the engagement on the meeting that I'm in. And in the remote world, again, when the video's off, it's very easy to not do that and for people to not know if you're really engaged. So I think that's a really great point on, like what it means to really be engaged in the remote first environment, and that's just for general work focus if nothing else. And it's interesting about the office because I did go into the office once or twice, in my local office here on the east side, and it was funny because actually people were complaining that the office background, the white walls, was too bright for them. And so I said, well, we kind of like your darker office at home. And I said, well, so it's kind of interesting how the dynamic shifted on, like, you have a very homey looking office because you obviously work remote, full time, as you have been for many years. But it is
yeah,
interesting how the times have changed, because I know in my last company many years ago, I would have to take the day off for the refrigerator to be delivered for 10 minutes because remote working was just not a thing. So I do think I'm very positive about the direction it's going. And we all have a lot of, things that we can work on to make it a better, work engagement model as well. So Andy, I think it's been great. I really want to thank you for the time that you spent here today. Is there anything else that you would like to chat about, at least for these topics? Because we can always do more topics later.
I'm just looking at my notes. I think I've covered everything, Milan. So I
No,
think I
that's
think we're
great.
I think we're good. Yeah.
No,
I
and
actually I have some other I have a whole other spiel I
okay.
could do on another video. So we'll save
Okay.
that
So
for
let's
another
do a
day.
teaser. What's the topic?
I've got a list of, like, what's the word? Lessons to live by at work, or something like that. So
Okay.
I have three little anecdotes that I like to share with people that kind of, what's the right word? Credos or what have you. So,
Okay.
anyways,
Okay.
I'd be
That's
happy to do another video and share that.
awesome. Well, let's do it. So we'll plan it out. So again, I'd really like to thank you, Andy. I think what you've talked about here today can help a lot of people, including people that are not only up and coming, but even people working today in a remote environment, coming from someone as successful as you've been with a truly a remote first environment. So I would just like to close where I think you made a great point about it's a conscious decision about what you want out of your career and life, and we have to accept that sometimes we may be making trade-offs like we do at any stage of our career
Yep.
with any type of career decision, because again, I'm really focusing on career. And what you said is absolutely true. You make decisions. Like, I'll tell you, I was asked the same question: would you consider moving down to California? And after myself and my wife stopped laughing hysterically, because we're not leaving the area either, again, I have given up opportunities because I wanted to stay in the area. And I think it's just important for people to recognize that when we make those decisions, it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that there are just different benefits that you get from one decision or the other. So
Yeah.
again, Andy, thank you so much for the time, and we'll look forward to the next discussion. And yes, we will plan that out. I think it sounds great. Thanks, Andy.
Milan, this has been a treat. Thank you very much.